Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Prudent Observations. I hope that you are all doing well on this fine Saturday for all of you. So as the title entails for today's discussion, I have some thoughts in mind, and maybe I'll give sort of a brief monologue of things that I've been noticing on the news and the trends. But I was originally going to have a discussion on deglobalization, and thankfully that is still very much in the works. I'll have the date and time for you in the announcement section, but Semyagog will be joining me, so he and I get to come again and enjoy a good geopolitical discussion, take a look at the literature and what this may mean, alongside our wonderful and mutual love for geography. So that discussion, which was originally slated for today, thankfully has been set, penned, scheduled, and set for the next week. But I did not want to ignore my weekly obligations to you all, so here I am, and I hope that we can have a pretty good discussion on a variety of things, as well as taking some of your questions. I feel like I haven't done that in a while because it's been more focused, of course, on putting up videos, getting stuff written, and I have a lot of that to discuss as well. But as for today, I wanted to focus on sort of these growing trends that I've been talking about. Specifically, I've noticed that there's been this increased tension between Saudi Arabia and Iran, to which the United States and other nations have started to evacuating their embassies, while at the same time there has been an increased discussion of deterrence between the issue over Taiwan and China over the Taiwanese Strait. And it's just seemingly all things seem to percolate around this sort of three-front conflict and all of the major hotspots, which, again, I think about the areas alongside Ukraine, around the Middle East, and then, of course, around China and Taiwan. And I can't help but think of people like Speakman, and I can't help but think of people like Mackinder. This sort of world island theory or this rimland theory all seems to be coming out into the way that they are. And last week we talked about Turbo America and this sort of complete idea that Fukuyama's of all the alternatives to liberal democracy, definitely comes to mind. And I can't help but think about that. The real critique that you could throw back at it would be in two ways. And I may flesh this out. Actually, I have fleshed it out because I started writing an essay about it. If you were to ever look into my Substack writer dashboard, there's probably, right now, there's 26 little articles or ideas that I want to write and put out there. So definitely, I didn't mean for that stream to be blackpilling either. And I actually haven't gotten through the comment section on that one either. But I intended it to be an understanding from where they're coming from. And, they are very much, or at least for the very least, Hanania is someone that kind of looks at the data and autistically will try and interpret it and read it the way that he does through his own political predilections, which, he's not our guy by any way, shape, or form. However, what I found particularly interesting out of this was that they look at the current situation and they don't think about the last 30 years in the lens that or at least that I think is better to look at it through, because they say, well, currently all these other regimes, all these other alternatives are, preferable or have not succeeded in the wake of liberal democracy. And they argue from this ideological lens that, well, the systems or the structures of government, it's very structuralist in their interpretation with these ideas, that, oh, by the way, we've won out because currently we can see the war in Ukraine and how that's going, that this sort of strongman system, and it's always strongman style forms of governance, isn't working out. We'll probably see the same with Viktor Orban in Hungary. And at the same time, the situation in China seems precarious with its economy. So perhaps really the alternative in the most robust fashion is, of course, the sort of Western-led American system of this international finance, globalized supply chains, and economics. Which is why at the same time, I thought that that'd be really interesting to talk deglobalization about, because in the midst of, I think, what is going to be a very coming Great Recession, the big sad 2.0, which we never really recovered from 2008 to begin with. We are going to see, I think, a very different political cycle emerge, because what came out of 2008 and the Euro crisis that shortly followed was this really the spark from the flint that struck on the political ground and managed to set the tinder on fire, wherein Euroscepticism became widely popular more than it ever had before, although the European New Right definitely had its ideas in the 1990s as well. And I think that you're going to see this sort of strange, stratified global economy in response to how nation states will interact with each other, especially when it comes to the fact that COVID had illustrated some of the tense problems of global supply chains, how that can be used as an economic weapon of war. And this talk about deglobalization has me constantly thinking, well, what are the parts of the world that we're going to see a renewed area of economic and political conquest in? I do think that Africa and South America are going to be some of the two largest fronts in this regard. And that'll be the conversation that I have with Semyagog in a few weeks. But I thought that those two would go hand in hand together. And yet at the same time, I was thinking really the height of American power would have been right after the Gulf War in 1992. You had virtually no other challengers that could have significant sway at the United Nations General Assembly, which is always, I think, a pretty good gauge on how things stand in terms of politics and where economic and political relations can be shown on full based on how nations vote. And at the same time, there was potentiality for a differing view of relations between both Russia and China to the United States in the 1990s. And I think that we're sort of watching, and this has been my thesis for a while, is that we're sort of watching the USG sort of catch up with its own foreign policy of the last 30 years. Especially when it comes to economics. I think that you're sort of beginning to see this conversation about, well, how effective has free trade been, in the same way that we've seen that conversation play out in the British Empire as well during its zenith, economically speaking. And that, I always think, is going to be the interesting thing that comes out of this, because, well, 2016 and that election really did see the death of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, even Hillary Clinton had to put her distance from it, despite her being a proponent of it and trying to get the talks in place, even when she was Secretary of State under the Obama administration. And at the same time, we're seeing this renewed focus, I think, on how our relationships will interact economically, while at the same time dealing with issues of sovereignty, trade, and technology. I think those are going to be some of the biggest areas as well. And that's the thing, is that, well, on one hand, that's correct, but on the other hand, great, they're in power. That technically means that they've secured victory, and they seems to be the convenient sort of lens of victory to view it all in. Is that, oh, well, they've won. They use force very effectively and collectively, which we definitely have seen throughout the histories of other democratic states before. And I'm reading chat this time. It's not like when I have a presentation up, so I get to see your comments live, which I find entertaining. So I just think that these are the things that we're going to be seeing in the near and immediate future, and that for sure is going to definitely happen. But as this little monologue sort of comes to an end, and I'll start taking a look at your questions and such, I do have Buy Me a Coffee linked in the description. I'm also working on getting, based on our conversation last week, I am working on getting a crypto wallet opened up, since there were a few people that were very adamant about sending cryptocurrency. So that is up next on my list. And as soon as that's updated, I'll have that up on my links down below. So was that a Freudian slip? Hitler and Clinton. She truly is our Austrian aunt, and her desire to, we saw, he died, as she chuckles and cackles. And the answer to this ranging mandrill is never, just never. But I think that the other thing I also wanted to do is, because the last time I did an AMA stream, I had said to people that I had not been reading a lot of any sort of political texts or anything like that. Have been mainly religious, and so I decided to pick up on a few. Like I said when I did the nuclear war or the nuclear weapons stream. I did a lot of reading for that one because I wanted to spend some time actually going through the literature and giving you guys a pretty in-depth hour-long lecture, because that's how as long as I like to do these things. So today I wanted to pull out the three main political texts, although I am going to do a book stream pretty soon with Dimes over at the Blood Satellite podcast. But these are the three that I've decided to go through again. Well, one I'm going through again, the other two I'm reading for the first time. So the first one is Politics as Usual, The Age of Truman and Eisenhower by Gary W. Reichard. So I've started going through this one, and it's been a pretty interesting series so far, just talking about, the era of hard feelings, Truman trying to get settled into his presidency after FDR had passed away. And it tells me a lot about sort of the internal politics of post-FDR America, which I find to be interesting because this is where you see the old right really die off, and where Eisenhower, who was originally supposed to run as a Democrat when he was running for presidency, but had gone to the Republican Party because it just seemed easier that way. And I thought that it definitely was something that was really interesting to see that play out. And I think that as there's this renewed interest to talk about the Cold War and our understanding of it and provide some more historicism to it, I really want to look at the beginning days of the Cold War. I've been sort of inspired by Thomas 7-7 when he's talking about that. So I think that this book will be pretty interesting. And of course, I'm rereading my half-price books copy of George F. Kennan's American Diplomacy. I had a much older copy that's really withered and torn, so I bought a new one not too long ago. And I love buying used books because you can see really nice things in the margins written in ink pen and such. So, for instance, I'm trying to find the page that had the most notes. But, like, for instance, Chapter 4 of World War I is just written all over the place inside the margins, which I quite enjoy because it's always nice to see other people's work and what they thought about books as well. But this one, of course, covers really the first half century of the 20th century's form of American foreign policy and politics. These were lectures and essays published throughout in George F. Kennan, which we've covered his life and works on 3 streams as well. So I want to do more biography streams. I know that those weren't the most popular, but I like them because I think it's important for us to understand the historical basis and the support that we get from our, our intellectual forebears and our forefathers, because I wouldn't have the geopolitical understanding I would if it weren't for people like Robert Conquest, if it weren't for people like John Mearsheimer, and especially George F. Kennan, who is a personal hero of mine who, left government when he thought that, he could no longer be serviceable because the people in charge went, to a different direction ideologically and politically in terms of policy, and spent the rest of his life articulating what he thought was right and what he believed in. And that's why one of my favorite books of his isn't anything about foreign policy. It's about the man himself, Round the Cragged Hill, which talks about his philosophy, his politics. I mean, he's a very anti-democratic individual, but I don't want to rehash that. We've got 3 great streams. Praise the Folly came on for the last one to talk about his life and his works, as well as his career as a foreign service officer, which, to be the first part of a newly modernized form of foreign service from that act in 1926 is indicative of what kind of man that he was, especially for someone who did not come from America's elite. He came from the Midwest in Wisconsin, and lo and behold, had one of the strongest lasting influences of his life on foreign affairs, especially with the Cold War. I was actually asked not too long ago by a viewer if someone would recommend John Lewis Gladys, or John Lewis Gaddis, and he's the official biographer of Kennan. Gladys's work is really good. I highly recommend it. So if you want to read an official biography that's not Kennan's own words, John Lewis Gladys is the guy to do so. And then the last one, of course, which I thought was great because who doesn't love Pat Buchanan? This one, of course, is Where the Right Went Wrong, How Neoconservatives Subverted the Reagan Revolution and Hijacked the Bush Presidency. This was written shortly after George W. Bush had taken office. Oh, well, actually, it's written in 2004, but he had been writing it throughout Bush's first term, not Bush Sr. And I like this book so far because it's just like, it's almost a continuation of Beautiful Losers. And I was telling Radlib this in chat. I said, if you want the sequel to Beautiful Losers, right now I'm about halfway through this book. That would be the one to go to, is where the right went wrong. In the same way that I think Death of the West is like kind of the American sequel to Decline of the West by Spangler, just like, or probably more like, what's the word I'm looking for? Suicide of the West by James Burnham. It's probably the better American sequel to that book as well. So I'm back on my, hobby horse, so to speak, when it comes to reading. And I feel like that's kind of important to do. Like, these are the things that I'm researching, and these are the things that keep in mind. And I mean, for instance, right, this comes to the subject of unwinnable wars. And so let's talk about his way of reading about war, and this is regards to the war on terror. And I thought that this passage, this is the chapter I'm on, was really good. So this is from chapter 4, called Unwinnable War. President Bush has been clear about why we must fight the war on terror, but less so about who exactly our enemies are. Unlike Hitler's Germany or Hirohito's Japan, terrorism is not a nation, a regime, or an army. Terrorism is a tactic, a technique, and a weapon that fanatics, dictators, and warriors have resorted to throughout history. If, as Clausewitz wrote, war is the continuation of politics by other means, terrorism is the continuation of war by other means. Writes historian Daniel Pipes. Terrorism is the military tactic employed by different groups and individuals around the world for different ends. To speak of a war on terrorism is a little like speaking about a war on weapons of mass destruction. One needs to know who owns or is deploying these weapons and for what reason. And he does a pretty good job at sort of just breaking down like the ideological, shambles may actually mean, whether it's trying to define terrorism, what that word might be used in policy context, and more importantly, what on earth the strategy is going to be in the long run. And so far, as I've been reading through this, it seems to echo quite well with other articles I've read in the 2020s, whether data-driven defeat or some recent Samuel Finley interviews about, his time overseas, as well as Josh Neal's work. So those are the books that I'm currently reading. I thought that it would be quite good for us to know. And I thought that, I will probably go through at least Buchanan's book, and I will probably do a pretty in-depth stream review and essay. Because the other review books that I'm coming out with, of course, is going to be Andrew Torba and Andrew Isker's review of Christian nationalism. I quite have enjoyed reading it. I mean, there's going to be areas where I theologically disagree with. I'm not an evangelical Christian, but there's stuff in there that I think on a pragmatic level, I think that could form a pretty effective coalition, or at least a pretty effective political vision to move off of. So I think that there's a lot of good stuff there. And then more or less, that's what I have for you guys in terms of reading and what I've been working on. And I'm going to start reading some of the stuff that you guys have been saying in chat and things like that. So, oh, right. There are two Jacobs in chat that go back and forth. There's Jacob J and then the regular Jacob. It's nice to see so many familiar names. This is one of the things that I like to see. I'm still getting used to this weird parasocial form of e-celebrity. But I have some writing announcements as well that'll come at the end. But the question, this one isn't a super chat, but I think that this is an interesting one nonetheless. If you had to make a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, what do you think would ensure a lasting peace? Well, it wouldn't be just between Russia and Ukraine. It would also have to be between more or less Western states as well as Russia and Ukraine. I think that any agreement that is going to be brokered has to be brokered as well by Western powers. Because as long as Zelensky is in charge, I think that we're not going to see negotiations on the table. I mean, more money continuously gets spent into that area. We just announced that we're going to send another $400 million, which, is an insane amount of money to think about. I think that the funniest tweet I saw about that $400 million announcement was, imagine how many Twitter employees you could hire with that money. But it would have to have Western leaders. I think that it would require a multilateral agreement in order to provide some end to the hostilities and to ensure a lasting peace, because we've witnessed on both sides, both Russia and sort of the West, this increased use of escalatory rhetoric that we talked about last week with regards to nuclear, or the other week with regards to nuclear weapons. I mean, there's been conversations about Scandinavian countries hosting nuclear weapon sites in order to sort of, act as a deterrent. And of course, Russia's announcement, both with the annexation of those territories, that they would utilize their doctrine of territorial defense with nuclear weapons as well, and just the amount of money, ammunition that has been spent by both sides, whether that's billions upon billions that the US and the West has sent, and the material and munition support of more or less suicide drones and other munitions from Iran. To me, it would have to be multilateral to say the least. And I would imagine that Russia would probably want China and Iran at the negotiating table as well, in order to counter any sort of multilateral presence that the West may put forward. But considering that the United States and other Western leaders have been a part of it, then yeah, you would have to have them present at the negotiating table. And the real question is, well, how to ensure lasting peace is almost impossible, I think, unless you can get some pretty. If from Russia's point of view, I don't know how you can achieve lasting peace if you're going to negotiate with the West, considering that there's this perceived notion that you can't trust the West to begin with. So I think that really you're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting up front in good faith to deal with that issue, how to address that. The second thing I think, of course, would be the positions that I think Mearsheimer has discussed. You would have to guarantee some kind of military neutrality with regards to NATO. I do think that Russia has a territorially, I think Russia would like to have something that connects Transnistria all the way to Russia's border, this land bridge from Transnistria, which covers the entire Ukrainian access to the Black Sea and keep them out. I personally think that that's what they want. However, if they would get that, I doubt it. But I think that the Ukrainians would like some access to the Black Sea port. I think that that would have to come into it. And Turkey would have to be present for those negotiations as well, because they're governed by the Montreux Convention, which they've used since the start of this conflict to keep foreign navies out of the Black Sea. As for lasting peace, it would have to be, I think, some form of Ukrainian military neutrality, i.e., not joining NATO. That seems to be one of the chief reasons that's been brought up, while at the same time maybe allowing the concession for them to join the European Union. The West might be okay with that because that allows you to sort of backdoor security agreements with this increased talk of European defense autonomy and European militaries or European expeditionary forces. But all the other conversations that we've had about peace talks or agreements that are for ceasefires and humanitarian corridors, those would have to be resumed alongside. And then the real conversation would be between the issue of rebuilding and what would be allowed in order to rebuild those areas, and potentially, having a internationally monitored, vote on annexation and separation. But even then, the West probably wouldn't like that because that's territorial sovereignty that would, cede territory to the others. And then last but not least, there's well-documented information, whether it's between this administration and other major members of the United States Senate and Congress, that shows that they have monetary and moneyed interests inside that nation as well to launder and lobby on their behalf. So you'd have to clear out the swamp here at home as well as to do that to ensure lasting peace. But the nature of wars is that people usually come to the negotiating table when things get bad, or they've got the momentum and they can claim victory. And so far, neither side wants to turn away from that, because right now it's easier to lobby on behalf of the West to get more money and to get more arms and to go out and negotiate. But the rhetoric now is getting to a point where we're being very serious about nuclear weapons policy and the use of it, and to not use atomic weapons, not to mention the whole issue with that region with the nuclear power plant that's being shelled and the International Atomic Energy Agency being there. So that could be a whole stream in and of itself. And maybe we can entertain that notion with a panel of individuals that are both pro-Ukraine and pro-Russia in regards to this conflict. I'm not pro either side. I would like the West to stop encouraging bloodshed and probably not lead us into some kind of major global war. But that's my position is pro-human. Let's stop killing each other and recognize that there are some serious grievances on either side. But even saying that gets you labeled as an opposition figure. But I mean, that would be a good stream discussion somewhere down the line. But some of you guys have sent super chats already, so I'm going to go through that way. I also have the buy me a coffee link as well because you guys get to send messages that way. I know someone doesn't, if you don't want to give Google your money or where they take 30% off the top, you can do that. There's also the subscribe star option for tips. Once I stop streaming from this laptop that I'm using, because I've been streaming from a laptop and recording on a laptop since I started the channel, and I get things a little more situated in this room for an actual desk and a bookshelf. That way, everything next to me isn't just piles and piles of texts. We'll be having my desktop computer in here. We'll be doing stuff where I can do OBS and entropy and everything to work out that way. So that's what I'm going to work on. Bolero393 asks if I have a managerial position or am I making it semi-pro? No, I do a lot of just online data entry stuff, which allows me to work from home and do things like this. It's why I said in my interview with Isaac Simpson, it's an underemployment than it is unemployment. But looking for something that is going to be more of a breadwinning job is what I'm still oriented around. But in this midst of still bringing in an income that pays for insurance and doesn't have me worried too much about money, is allowed me to sort of flourish here. I guess my personality has kind of gotten around, which I'm sort of blessed by in one ways. I was approached to write. I'll just give the announcement now. I was approached to write an article for the American Mind. So I'll be working on that shortly. I was also recently asked to maybe write something for Gab's little editorial and blog thing. So I guess I've grown in some degree of popularity, which I kind of find a little hard to believe myself sometimes. I'm very humbled by it. But no, I just have a simple data entry work from home job while I still look for the real kind of employment that I'm looking for in my background, which is marketing, community organizing, grant writing, nonprofit work. Because I left working in law and I didn't go to law school in part because I woke up one day working in this like 3-story house that had been converted into a place for people to rent a bunch of law offices out of. And I was sort of the manager of it in one person's practice. And I was just absolutely miserable. I mean, the money was fantastic, but I hated it mainly because it was family. And so day in and day out, I got to watch people use their children as weapons or not negotiate fairly because they were so spiteful towards their ex-husband or soon-to-be ex-wife. And that really did. I mean, if you want to see the ashes of like how civilization operates, divorce court is probably one of them. And I pray that you never have to go through it, Bolero. And for those of you that are divorced, I think you can speak to it very personally in that regard. But the work from home data entry thing has allowed me to be very prolific, I guess, and trying to keep getting stuff out and going. But yeah, I guess someone by pro, I mean, I guess someone has decided to find me. I guess someone has decided to find me online to be somewhat of an interesting character, and I'm very blessed by it, to say the least. So let's move on. We did get one from Buy Me a Coffee, which I always appreciate, and thank you. So this is from Ogata, who I know used to have a different name on YouTube. I guess they changed it. Just wanted to support and let you know that I'm an ex-weeb but not a current one. Doesn't mean what I'm not going to even try and pronounce it. Will be let. This is the same person that's been trying to get this frog anime character for Frog of the Week. As I said on Turnip Stream, it's just never going to happen. I mean, I'm fine with a running gag. I appreciate the support, but not my cup of tea. I've seen a few Studio Ghibli films. The one thing that popped up on my YouTube recommendations was this like 1980s one that was basically an anime version of Top Gun. I think it's called Site 88 or whatever, or Area 88. And that looks really good. I've always loved aircraft since I was a kid. So if I were to like drop everything, my dream job would be to be like some guy that just flies a crop duster or something like that. But it looked really good. But it's just never been something that I grew up watching or anything like that. So your support, though, nevertheless, is greatly appreciated. Hunger the Die Merchant for $2 US. Thank you so much. Which lefty progressive is my guilty pleasure? Well, for the longest time, my guilty pleasure of people I would follow or watch on Twitter was Noah Smith at No Opinion, and he blocked me. So I would have to create an alt to hate watch this guy, but I'm not that kind of person. But he was up there on my list of people that I like, sort of just gauge what kind of crazy shit progressives are saying, and it's always entertaining to say the least. But I'm blocked by him because he had said something really dumb, like, "Well, in a nuclear war, living in the cities is on the front lines," and I'm like, this dude wants to, feel so self-important behind a computer screen that he has to implicate himself and institute himself as this great hero of a nuclear conflict where he would be obliterated in an instant. And I got auto blocked after that. In the same way that I'm also blocked by Claire Lehman and others. Although I don't know what you could call them as a progressive or not, but I do think that that's something for sure that I like to follow. I really don't have too many guilty follows or guilty pleasures. The closest thing I can get to guilty pleasures is sometimes when I'll peruse and I'll see like a video essay review of like a TV show or a video game retrospective, and then all of a sudden, like halfway through, I hear this like really cringe take about representation in a 1990s sitcom, or how Fallout New Vegas is like, oh, why Mr. House is like a really bad, evil, authoritarian character, and I'm just like, well, the rest of this review's been pretty good, but like your politics are garbage. So I really my guilty pleasure more than anything isn't progressives. It's like long, the white man's burden of long form video essays and retrospectives, because some of those are a really great way to help me fall asleep after a long day. I hate to admit it. For instance, like the one thing I really do like that probably is a guilty pleasure because you could spend your time being more productive. I really like Patrician TV because he's done like two really super long-winded reviews of the Elder Scrolls series. Like his review of Morrowind is almost 8 hours. His review of Oblivion is almost 13 hours, and his review of Skyrim is going to be like 20 hours and 11 minutes and 11 seconds. And for some reason, I just got excited about that. That's progressive politics. It's just video game reviews. That's my there's my real guilty pleasure. But let's see. QWERTY or QWERTY ZZ7 for $5 Canadian. Why the mustache? Is it to counter the full beard of the left and the clean shave of the neocon right? Well, I'll just be perfectly honest with you. It's probably the best thing that I can grow. I can't grow a beard very well. It comes in very not very full in places that I'd like, although I'm not vain enough to buy like the roller and do the whole oil stuff on my face. This is as best as it gets, really. And the longer that I have it, the thicker and fuller it grows, so I'm really not complaining. But I like it, and it's also because if I were to shave my face, I feel like I would look like I'm Turnip's age, and I'm almost a decade older than him. So it's definitely not something I want for sure. And I think that, I think you can tell a man when he's got a beard by his politics. Like, I think the way that people will like have it manicured or done on like a lot of progressives, and sort of like everyone knows what I'm talking about with like the Vaush beard or the soy beard that people have, where it does to sort of hide their more rounded, lipid features. But I think that if I had the capability to grow one, I would probably leave it minimally managed, and I would just look like your run-of-the-mill person that you could see at my parish. So, if I could one day, maybe that's the thing that God tells me, that I won't ever be clergy because I can't grow a beard very well. But the mustache is because I like it, and I've been told in person that it looks very Anglo on me, so I quite like it even more. Let's see here. All right. This is another one from Buy Me a Coffee. So wonderful. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Yassine comes in and says, originally wrote this as a comment on your shielding speech video, but it seems to be filtered out for some reason or another. I typically don't delete comments, so unless someone is splurring out slurs, but I don't do that. I don't delete them. Usually they get filtered out. I'll double check in studio. But he says, but it seemed to be filtered for some reason or another. I just wanted to say your speech at the Shieldings event was great. And I read it in the event book, but it was good to finally hear how it was properly intended. I did a similar speech at the Nomos Birmingham event, and granted it was a lot shorter than yours and more focused on basket weaving. If you get the chance to give it a read, I would really appreciate your feedback. And he links to the Anti-Politics, which I know is Scrump and Evelyn's uh, essay, or the Substack, but originally presented by Yassine at the Nomos Birmingham event. So yeah, I'll be happy to read it and go over it and give you my feedback. Probably won't be on this stream, but I can happily do a little tweet thread about it and link it in the community tab. So thank you so much. The next one is also from Buy Me a Coffee, which I greatly appreciate. I actually like that more because at least because it'll tell you what to buy it. I know you can change it to be like buy me a bagel or buy me a pint. But mine is a coffee because that's really my only vice. But he says, here we go. Hi, I've built a video chat that I hope will mitigate some of the more parasocial aspects of social media. Talking groups can overhear each other, allowing you to have conversations more naturally. I think this could be helpful getting the viewers to meet each other first virtually, then in person. Videocorners.com is the site. Let me know if there's anything I could do to help. So Video Corners says it's a video chat that splits people up into groups where you can overhear each other like IRL. With mutable internal breakout rooms, you can actually have video conferencing with multiple conversations, video chat for the whole team, friends, or family. Limited support for iOS. Interesting. And he's going to be releasing a dev kit soon. Well, Joseph, this looks really cool. I can pass this along to here. I'll share it on screen so everyone can see what I'm talking about. I like that's a neat little tool. It might be good for some of the things that are going to come up on Monday, but yeah, this is neat. So yeah, but I'm in a couple of group chats that we meet up regularly or we talk about things and things like that. I'm sure this has got purpose somewhere, and like you said, maybe it could have an impact on how we engage in the parasocial. Not to say that the parasocial is entirely bad, because I have parasocial relationships with people that I really like. Most notably people like Dave the Distributist and a few others. But, I think that this could be useful somewhere. So thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. But yes, to go back, the mustache is mainly so I just don't look like I'm 12. I've got that issue there as well. Im for $10 Canadian says, Prudentialist, did the unconditional surrender in World War II guarantee Russian supremacy in Europe and Asia in the subsequent Cold War? I don't think it's the unconditional surrender part that allowed Russian supremacy in Europe and Asia. It was primarily, we gave Russia its strength primarily through Lend-Lease, and there's some great speeches by Senator Taft and others during the war that was really adamantly against this, that I think is really worth reading. Shama Meekin's Stalin's War really does detail that the level of influence that Stalin had on FDR's administration and just how much armament, and supplies that we had given to the Russians throughout their technology. Our armaments, technology, trucks, petrol, ammunition, aircraft, all those things immediately sort of come to mind. I don't know if it was the unconditional surrender in World War II aspect. It certainly would have, because it plays a role, but I don't think it's the ultimate factor. I think it also has to do with the fact that we had given Russia an insurmountable amount of money, aid, arms, supplies that would allow them to be more or less ready to go. And they probably would have, I don't know how well we would have fought them if, say, Operation Unthinkable happened and we decided to go after them, because they were ready for more, and they had a hefty amount of intelligence assets inside the United States at that time. Stalin was aware of what was going on in the Manhattan Project, despite our efforts at secrecy. So, it would have been a bloody conflict for sure. But I do think that boosting the Soviet Union during the Second World War through Lend-Lease, the sharing of intelligence and providing material assistance, probably did a lot more than just the policy of unconditional surrender. Not to say that negates or surpasses your point, but I think that they kind of go hand in hand. But thank you so much for the donation. But yeah, let's keep up with chat here. Just scrolling through and checking up on everybody. Uh, Fishy Frenzy for 10 or €2. Thank you so much. Favorite video games? Well, the original Halo trilogy for starters. I'm more of a fan of FPSs, but I really do like immersive sims. So the original Deus Ex, both System Shock games, if you can get them running, which you can really easily with good old games. That's the fun part, right? Is that I have this like kind of expensive gaming PC. I have a 2080 Ti and everything like that. And what do I use it for? I use it to play 20-year-old video games. But the other thing too is that I also play War Thunder because I like aircraft, and it hits that perfect balance between simulator-esque and arcadey flight shooter, where you still get to learn how to master flaps, your engine power, combat, and your aiming. I like that a lot, but some old school boomer shooters as well. I really like what people are doing with like new build engine games. Duke Nukem 3D is really not the 3D, but not as long as Duke Nukem 3D is great, but as long as it's not Duke Nukem Forever, we're good there. So older boomer shooters, older immersive sims. I really like Daggerfall and Morrowind. So it's just the nature of the time frame that I grew up in. I grew up in the late 90s or throughout the 2000s, came of age during the Obama administration. So that'll tell you my video game lens. So, anything pre-Gamergate, you can pretty much be safe that it won't be nearly as paused. It'll be a little more subtle. Giant Art Production says, no opinion's a good choice because you need a guy who is wrong about absolutely everything. Yeah, I mean, he was my guilty pleasure until I got blocked. But I like what people do on Twitter now when they like retweet shitlib accounts. They'll quote tweet them, and then the reply will be the screenshot of the tweet that they're quote tweeting for the blocked. I like that practice because they keep blocking us, and we still want to keep making fun of them, which is always greatly appreciated, to say the least. No opinion or Noah Smith or whatever. He's definitely my guy on that list to be up there for sure. And Layman is a girl in denial. Yeah, that's probably true. Let's not kid ourselves. I still can't get over the fact that IAEA is got published in Reason magazine. Like the total state of libertarian publications is that we're allowing literal prostitutes that defend terrible like in white women tradition with dogs, and she'll defend the stuff on Twitter and she'll tweet the most insane demonic shit possible, and lo and behold, we're going to talk about sex work and libertarianism in Reason magazine. Thank you. What happened to them? But I know this one isn't a super chat, but I wanted to bring it up because this has been the discussion that was on Anglo Ortho's stream the other day. And of course, my whole project of 2022, 2023, as I told Isaac Simpson on the Carousel podcast, I want to focus on, well, we've identified the problem, right? This issue of being atomized and deracinated. Well, how can we correct that? What are the solutions? Which I think I've been working on, and as well as positive visions going forward. Because I think when we talk about, say, negative visions or clear them out, the question that my brain immediately thinks to is that scene, that post-credit scene in Finding Nemo, where the rest of the fish in the dentist office, they get in their little baggies, they execute their escape plan, and they get into the ocean. They made it across the street in traffic, and they're just floating there in their baggies, and the pufferfish asks, well, now what? And I think that's a question that we should be asking ourselves is, well, now what? And going from there. So I think that it's good that we're doing more local stuff. But you ask, in an effort to be more pro-social, I'm meeting a lot more locals lately. The college-educated ones tend to be strongly but passively paused. How do I best help them out in their curse? Well, as I've said in my speech, and as I've said elsewhere, I think that it's important for us to not completely denigrate them. I think that when we talk to a lot of people that hold these positions, they're the socially agreeable default ones. I mean, that's where you get the phrase default Democrat a lot of times when it comes to voting patterns, just because they go with what's agreeable. They go with what has been taught to them, what they've been socialized with. So, I mean, you're not going to go out of your way and immediately start talking about historical revisionism or why, truly things are a little weird about overrepresentation in media. But I think that the place that you should start with is taking a look at the material conditions around them based upon progressive narratives. And so the talking points that I would probably use would be the ones that Dave the Distributist pointed out in his responses to Adam and Sitch, where he had outlined, I think it was like 18 points of where, the modern current project has gone terribly wrong. And I would go from there because I think that that's a really good place to start at. So talk about wealth, talk about material conditions, talk about declining birth rates, talk about the issue of fertility, talk about obesity, talk about the fact that there seems to be this pipeline from birth control to SSRI usage. And now there's even medical data that talks about, well, we don't even know how effective SSRIs are at all. And that's even more concerning. So I think that would be places to start with, is just the things that they can physically observe. I mean, the question that I always like asking people is like, when was the last time you were happy, or what makes you happy? Because that's the reason why I always tell people, I said, when you turn off your phone at night and you stare into the screen, like you're staring into the abyss of your own reflection, are you happy with what you see? And I think that goes a long way in helping people sort of look at their ideological or their socialized priors of their first assumptions or first principles, and makes them think, maybe things aren't right, or maybe things are kind of messed up. It's the same reason why talking about the paradox of declining female happiness is one of my like weird, interesting niche subjects, because we spent all this like 150 years of women's lib in a lot of ways, and in sort of liberating them from the traditional social mores of what we live and operate under. And then lo and behold, they're more unhappy than they've ever been before. And I think that that's a really tragic issue for us to look at. So hopefully those areas will be helpful in that regard. Yeah, so I definitely was a big fan of that. Also, yeah, I mean, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri is a fantastic game, and we haven't really gotten anything like that, although I've been told Terra Invicta is good. That sort of faction, decide what you want to do with the human race and things like that. So things that I think you should look at. So I appreciate it. I typically don't side with the Legion. I typically side with Mr. House every time, because I like my Singapore Nick Land techno singularity that brings mankind out of the ashes of nuclear war. Plus, he's kind of based when he talks about democracy. So I usually side with him, or I'll do the yes man option. But I get to decide which factions live or die. So that's just me. But I usually stick with that. But if you want to know more about Fallout New Vegas, I had a great conversation with Paul Fahrenheit and Kid Ace of Epic Lounge Sound Center. And we talked about the politics of Fallout New Vegas on my Substack. You can go look that up under the podcasts tab. So it was a really great 2-hour plus discussion. I think you would also enjoy it as well. So thank you. But I side with Mr. House more than I do Caesar's Legion. That's for sure. FAA Tuesday for $5 US. I think Russia's definitely bit off more than they could chew with Ukraine. Putin's regime is old now, and their window has closed. I don't know if they've bit off more than they could chew. I don't know if they had expected just the overwhelming amount of billions upon billions of dollars from the West that had came in. Plus, I mean, the military, I think, or at least from the Ukrainian side, seemed a little more ready to defend, and were a little more entrenched than I think that the Russians were initially expecting. Like, this wasn't going to be 2014, let alone Georgia in 2008. That was for sure. But the thing that makes me a little worried, and I don't know how founded or grounded this is more of a gut instinct, is I don't know if Putin has a successor, and I don't know if he's got someone in mind to replace him. Because if not, then all hell breaks loose, right? Because if he is handed a very real strategic or political defeat in this conflict, then who knows who succeeds him, and who knows what may come after it. So I don't know. I mean, the window might be closed. Who knows? I do think that they're probably going to at least hold on to their 2014 borders at the very least. I don't know if they'll manage to hold on to. I think that they probably will, especially if they go to the negotiating table. I doubt that they'll let those 4 regions that they've recently annexed via vote go. But I'm more concerned about what comes after Putin. That would be the thing that I think anyone with, even the guys that do open source intelligence gathering, or the guys over a gray zone world, the work that Mike Shelby and them do, I would have to ask him, because I'm very curious to know what they think the succession might be, because I don't know who Putin's successor would be, and I think that it would be a very dangerous situation for us to come out of there. So yeah, I mean, those are things that come to mind Tuesday. But this war is still going to drag on, and based upon the rhetoric I've heard from the State Department and the complaints about weapons not being verified for inspection to where they want to go, makes me feel like my prediction in January of this year kind of came true, that if an invasion was going to happen of Ukraine, that the West would support Ukraine and we would get a cold, hot, or like an isolated hot conflict inside of that country, just like we saw with Syria. Except this time it's way closer to Russia's borders. The stakes are much higher. I mean, obviously, we've been talking about nuclear weapons now for months. So I think that that's really, really important for us to keep in mind. But it does seem like we're going to get a hot, isolated proxy conflict, just like we did with Syria. Except this time the stakes are even higher. And I'm afraid that prediction came true, unfortunately. Someone is suggesting a non-subversive Discord. I have one for patrons. So Jacob, if you want to be a patron for as low as $2 a month on subscribestar.com/theprudentialist, you can find access to the Discord there. We do book reviews. People can share memes, send video recommendations, articles, and stuff like that. So it always works that way. I greatly appreciate it. And now I see that chat's arguing over Red Letter Media. I like them. I comment on their videos a lot, which always leads to people asking me questions about what are you doing here and stuff like that. That's always entertaining. There are some really good questions in chat first, but I do want to get to the super chats before I get to the issues here. But here we go. Felix Kalamatis for $10 US. Well, I greatly appreciate it, Felix. Thank you. Can you share your thoughts on the prospect of human space exploration / colonization? The common refrain of "we need to solve Earth problems first" I hear on both the left and the right. Well, as a kid, and I still do actually, I'm not. Let's not kid myself here. Is that I grew up loving astronomy. I loving aviation. I still do. I still follow what NASA's up to. I still follow what SpaceX is up to, and what the European Space Agency, or what the Indians or the Chinese or the Japanese Space Agency are doing. I feel like it's a place that man is supposed to go to. I mean, I think that it is inevitable that we're probably going to do it with the technology that we have available. Or, I could be completely wrong, right? And then the truth is that like we can't breach God's firmament over the earth, right? And then we'll really get a good talking to from the on high. But I think that we're destined for it. I think that the problem is that our management system and what we've done out of it and how we've changed our, like, this isn't Werner von Braun's NASA, right? The guys that got us to where we were in the 1960s and 70s, those aren't the same people anymore. I can't help but look at the International Space Station and personally think that is an impressive amount of human engineering and achievement, and it's a multinational effort. And I mean, I have to also be mindful and not think about, oh, well, that's just, like all mankind getting together. Like, no, it won't be that way. The future of any sort of space exploration is still going to be heavily based upon the nation state. It will evolve, and I think that there's a little bit of realism in The Expanse. I actually wrote a paper about this in college about what this might look like. I may have to go back to it and do a video or a stream about it, because I think that some of the political aspects of The Expanse got a lot right, and how that might look and how that might affect the human development outside because of the issues of gravity, radiation, and etc. But I get positive about it. On one hand, I'm kind of like unabashedly a chauvinist about it, because I just think about all the protests that happened during the 1960s. Oh, well, all this could be used for Gibbs, and I don't want to give you Gibbs. I want to go to space. I want to explore the stars. But on the other hand, I think that if we're going to dedicate a lot of exploration to things, I would really want us to explore the oceans as well. The oceans are vastly unexplored. We only know roughly 2 to 5% of the world's oceans and what's underneath them and what's inside them. So I think a lot of our technology could also be used in our research of understanding the world below us, because that would give us an understanding about, the aspects of the Earth's mantle and tectonic plates, as well as the development of species under high pressure and things that are completely alien to us, and how animals evolve without light sources, what they survive off of. So I think that I'm optimistic on the prospect of it, especially in the hands of those that have the technical expertise and capability. But I think that if you're going to explore space, you also need to explore the oceans as well. As for solving Earth problems first, you're not going to get a utopia. There's always going to be problems. And so we have to get utopian thinking out of our heads. That's just what fundamentally makes us, right wing, is to be realistic and not utopian. But let's see here. There was a really good question in here earlier that wanted me to be that was asked, that I wanted to look at real quick before I get to the rest of the super chats. It was about Pakistan. What's going on in Pakistan? I mean, Imran Khan has been, has massive amounts of popular support. The footage that I've seen of him with the rallies and wanting to outsource things, and he's explicitly calling out the United States for sort of sending him the boot, because the way that he was out in the votes and such was really kind of procedurally done in ways and formats that just seemed really temperamental. It kind of was like, okay, something's clearly off here, and that's definitely the problem that I find to be here and our current issue in day and age. But I don't know if he's going to try and coup the place, because the Chinese are also kind of interested in having Pakistan being a regional partner in the area. They've got the Chinese-Pakistan Economic Corridor as well. So, but like I said, I need to do more research on that area and follow up on it. But something's definitely going on there that we've probably had a hand in. So let's see here. I'm going to just scroll through. Let me go get to, here we go. Tuesday says, for $5 US, I'm genuinely distressed by the climactic changes that we're going through. Everything beautiful that I wanted to share with my children is dying. Well, I mean, I wonder how many other people have said that throughout history, and how many other people had been feeling genuinely distressed over those things. I can only imagine, for instance, how people must have felt in October of 1962. And I wonder how people might have felt during the Spanish influenza of 1918 and 1919, or in any other previous economic situation, whether it's the Great Depression or most well known, I think, and most infamously, is the Black Death, the Black Plague. And what was funny is that during this whole COVID thing, there was an article that came out from a historical journal, and it was talking about the records of people's lives during the Black Death. And there were records about, trials by jury that were still happening. People were still tithing at their churches. People were still paying their property taxes and paying their rent. And, there's great agricultural records. I mean, that's sort of the cool thing about European history, is that we've got records for everything, right? We publish everything that we do. And people still lived their lives. As for what we seem to be beautiful, or what seems to be good, it is distressing, but I think that should behoove you then to rear your children right, and to let them know that there are still things that are beautiful in this world. I mean, we've grown increasingly disconnected from nature. We've grown increasingly disconnected from the outdoors. I mean, this is why that's partially why I do the fishing videos. It's not just because I love it as a hobby, but because I get my best thinking done when I'm not inside of my room. I walk around the property line 3 times, both to do prayer and to read scripture, because I'd rather do it outside of my room or my context, not just behind me there, where you can see my icons in my bookshelf, or my little coffee table with all my religious texts and readings. But I think that it's important for us to recognize that, yes, there are things that are beautiful and good that are under attack and that people want to subvert or dissolve or anything. And even with fiction, right? There's some inherently, dare I say, reactionary things that exist inside the worlds, even like Harry Potter. Like, it's a British boarding school, it's meritocratic, it takes Gothic architecture, things that are distinctly English and European. Um, and I mean, those things, they can't take, they can make it as positive as they want. They can't take that stuff away from it because they would have to intrinsically acknowledge the fact that those things are there for a reason. The same way that ancient literature is there for a reason. The same reason why Beowulf or the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Iliad and the Odyssey are all so important to us because they're still beautiful and they still stood the test of time. Two Broke Girls or this new god-awful Velma TV show where they've race-swapped and done all sorts of crazy stuff to Scooby-Doo and Hanna-Barbera characters, that won't be remembered. What will be remembered are the works of literature that we write and preserve today and the beauty that we create now, which will be your children, which will be the contributions you make to your church and your family, and the things that you make as a community around us. There's going to be a lot of things that we won't get to see the impact of. And sometimes even in our real life right now, we can be blinded to the impact that we have right before us. And I think that that's sort of the important thing. And as for stress, Tuesday, I know that you're Catholic, and I only know because of that super chat you sent to the Distributist. But there's everyone likes to quote Matthew 6:33, where Jesus says, first seek the kingdom of God and all else. First seek the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all else shall be rendered unto you. And I can't help but think of myself about what follows. Matt 6:33, and therefore do not worry about tomorrow. For tomorrow, for worry, for unto itself sufficient is the day as its own evil. And I think in these times, sufficient is the day as its own evil. And maybe we should be focusing on that rather than what will be destroyed or what may come next. Because if we spend our time panicking or being, feeling doomed or black-pilled, then we would be in a state of learned helplessness. And we shouldn't be in a state of learned helplessness because that's the system's neatest trick, as Mr. Kaczynski likes to tell us, and technological slavery. So I think that we're a little bit better than that. So while you may be distressed, know that you are called to create beautiful things, both in your family, your children, your life, your works, what you consume, because the things that you will surround yourself with are also going to be a reflection of your identity. So by all means, Tuesday, do not be worried about tomorrow. For tomorrow will worry for itself. Sufficient is the day as its own evil. Let's see here. I'm just watching Gio's takes on everything going on in the world right now. There we go. Well, if you're a glutton for pain and suffering, I mean, you shouldn't be. That's only going to make it worse. And I'm not here to black pill you. That's going to be the thing here that I really don't want you to do. A sharp cheddar sour. I love the name. Sour. I'm not sour scrote game. 97 gaming. That's great. Sharp cheddar, really good Swiss, and Gouda. I like those three. Those are the three that I like. That's a good question. Ogata sent another one from Buy Me a Coffee, which I greatly appreciate it. He says, after a mental breakdown in college, I've struggled to get back into being social. I've gotten better in several areas, but getting back into dating has been rough. Any tips where to start? My church is very small. Our app's the way. I gotta go. Oh man. And this is the real talk that patrons are going to see later tonight when I upload it to Subscribestar, because I talk about distance and what technology has done about dating and relationships and intimacy, sort of this like death of Eros. So if it makes you feel any better about tips where to start, my parish is incredibly small, and I am one of 3 unmarried men there. The rest have children, and the rest have wives that are expecting. So I can understand and relate to that experience in that regard. But if you're going to do an app, I suppose that, and I don't know what faith-based, I'm going to assume that you're Christian if you're talking about a church. I don't know what denomination you're under, but I mean, if you're going to go with an app, and if you're serious about finding somebody that's, that's marriage material, at the very least, I would try. And for instance, I know that there's a subreddit for Catholic dating. I do have friends that are Catholic that have found their spouses that way, and they're still married and they've got children. It's worked out. I know that Dave the Distributist and his wife met on a dating site. I can't knock them. I think that apps like Hinge, Bumble, Tinder, etc., have such a toxic environment, and illustrates that how men will gauge women on a bell curve, but women, it's either you're really attractive or you're ugly, and it's a majority of men over there on this like 80-20 Pareto distribution. So I would argue that if you're going to do anything like that, Agata, if you're going to get back into it, make sure that you're, a sociable person, if you can hold up conversation with your peers and things like that. And I mean, the other thing with your church is that if there are women there in your church, say they're older or you're close to them, they might make recommendations to you if you express that as an interest. I mean, that happened to me once, and, it was nice that someone recommended me somebody and it went well. I mean, it didn't turn out great or anything like that, but things like that happen, just like, well, not for me type deal. But if you're going to go with apps or anything like that, use maybe a Christian oriented dating website or things like that. It's just, I also don't have the world's best advice to give, just because I went from this PUA sleeping around, my mother even calling me out on it, to, being a little more serious and oriented for those things. So make sure that you're expressing exactly what you want and what you think that you're looking for, which hopefully is marriage and children, and set yourself in the appropriate environment that will get you to that direction. But yeah, it's definitely stuff that I quite enjoy in that regard. I mean, it's all pretty rough. But yeah, let's see here. Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme. That definitely feels appropriate sometimes in that regard. Okay. Well, Lutheran. Well, I'm sure that there's resources out there that's available. I mean, if you want maybe some Lutheran-oriented advice, maybe go send a question over to Mr. Turnipseed. I mean, he might know a little bit better about how the social position of Lutheran dating world is going to be the case. And everyone's talking about cheese, which I definitely brought that up in that one question, but that it's true. I think this is the only time I've ever seen scripture referenced as a banger. So but yes, that verse about worry is indeed a banger. Almost everything, actually everything that Jesus has said is a banger. You should go adhere to what he says and listen to his apostles and the fathers of the church that have followed him in apostolic succession. Because yes, Jesus and everything that he said is a banger for sure. Cool Chickens asked me, when are me and the Distributors going to do a Decemberist stream? I could talk to him about it. We can talk about like the cringe bands of the early 2000s that we grew up listening to. The Decemberists are a band with like Colin Malloy and others, and they still do albums. I mean, I think their newest one, and it's not the same stuff that I liked from their earlier albums, but I grew up, I listened to them still. I really like Colin Malloy's voice. I mean, the Crane Wife or the Mariner's Revenge song, they're all bangers. I quite like them. But if Dave ever wants to talk about like cringe bands from the 2000s and stuff like that, where the Decemberists, the Shins, and so on, Iron and Wine, Death Cab for Cutie, the Postal Service. I mean, sure, that'd be a fun, weird nostalgia trip to talk about the pause and the cringe of early 2000s indie sad white boy music, because boy, oh boy, that's what I listened to a lot of in middle school and high school and college. I will wholeheartedly admit that, while nowadays I just listen to Rush or classical music or religious hymns and chant. So it's definitely a weird mix of things for sure. But yeah, no, it was definitely a fun time to say the least. Big Tuna asks, the answer's convert. Was not raised in it. Come 2020 happened and kidney failure had came around. I was like, I should probably get right with my creator, because they're throughout 2020, there were like 3 big, really close brushes with my mortality, whether it was like a post-op infection or other things like that. And so I spent a lot of 2020, the latter half of 2020 and the early parts of 2021, visiting a lot of churches. And my earliest like sort of stream of consciousness rant streams talk about this. I would visit a Catholic church one week. I would visit a different Protestant service one week, and I would visit an Orthodox church every now and then. But I sort of just came to it when I had heard my first divine liturgy, and I felt like I couldn't leave, like I'd had to come back. And that's what I've stuck to. And the catechumen there, one day, the joy of sacramental living will come to me. But I'm a convert to it by nature of just wanting to get right with my Creator. And what really, really settled it with me was one day I was talking with my catechizing priest. I had sort of told my story about, wanting to get right with God in the midst of my own mortality in my mid-20s. And he had told me the story that, growing up, he had a friend who was one of the first kidney transplant patients ever in the United States. And before they ever had like the technologies and drugs that we take for granted in the transplant world, people will take Epogen to help with their red blood cell count while they're on dialysis and are heavy on protein. They didn't have that stuff back then. And he was just telling me everything that his friend had to endure and went through, and how, even when he was, looking towards his own religion, because he was my catechizing priest was Catholic and then turned Orthodox. I was just, that to me, that was the sure sign that I was where I was supposed to be. And the more I think about it, really, a lot of people in my parish have survived really tough, close medical calls, whether it's, cancer, open heart surgery, or other diseases. And still they've managed to have beautiful families, beautiful children. Even the person that I'm learning iconography under, she just won a huge battle with cancer. And so I just think that I'm in the right place. And I don't talk about it very much on this channel, just in part because I don't think it's my place to speak on the faith as someone who's still learning. But that is just, I am a very happy convert, and one that I hope not to be one of those sort of memeable persons for sure. So, that's just my, yeah, who knew that God has good insights? The new gospel just dropped. Oh, well, if there's a meme there, that's going to come out of it, which is the that line in Matthew is a banger. I can't help but think that that's pretty funny for sure. Yeah. But did I change my music tastes? No, they're still all over the place in terms of music tastes. I still like all those bands that I just mentioned, but I'll also listen to one of my all-time favorite bands is Rush. I've got all of their discography in my car that I like to listen to when I'm driving. If I'm not listening to a podcast or I don't have cell reception, I really enjoy Steely Dan. They're one of my all-time favorite bands, and I think that they are the perfect band of the 70s to sort of highlight the decadence and the decay that came out of the Summer of Love in 1968 and so on, sort of that post-60s revolution. So I just think to myself, I just started listening to more music, and I started listening to my friends' recommendations. And so, for instance, like 21 Pilots, before they got big, I had a friend who was obsessed with them. And so I was like, oh, they're pretty good. And then I found other bands that I liked, and, that, and I started listening to classical music way more. It's why, I've got Sati at the beginning of the channel when I'm letting people roll on in with the timer countdown and stuff like that. So it's just stuff that I just try my best to be more open-minded with music. That's for sure. So yeah. But yes, oh god, I am trying to avoid that. But let's with that, I do have some announcements to make. We've been going on for a little hour now. I'll still take any more super chats and questions if you guys send them in the meantime. But let me go share my screen, and we will go remove this from Studio. Let me make sure I've got everything that I need for this to go up with. I do. Perfect. All right, cool. So we're going to share screen real quick. We'll get to Frog of the Week and announcements. But first, of course, I love Any Major Dude, but I also love Midnight Cruiser, Deacon Blues, Dirty Work, Bodhisattva. I like all of their band. I love their music. I really do. But let's go on to sharing screen for announcements because it said I do have quite a few. Yeah, I have also used this in a video intro for The Two Forests. That is one of my favorite symphonies of all time. You can't go wrong with him for sure. But let's go share screen now and get started with announcements. So, slideshow, please. Thank you so much. So as for announcements, I'm going to go put myself in the background now. Let's see here. So as always, I will probably keep the old titles so people can know when I've changed. So the Sunday stream, of course, now is the Prudent Observations. We do this every Saturday now instead of on Sundays. I like having the Sunday, the Lord's Day, day of the resurrection off, so to speak. That's also when I stop really tweeting. I do my good morning Twitter, good morning, go to church tweet, and then that's usually it for the day. But I do have a lot of stuff packed for you all. So I will be on the Herove Morik show this coming week. I think on Thursday is the time that we're going to have it on TNT Radio. You might know him from the channel on Telegram as well as on YouTube and their podcast, Geopolitics and Empire. I've cited them before. I quite like their work and the interviews and the research that he's done, and along with the people he has on as guests, because these are usually accredited guys that are also like just, professionally dissident voices, which I quite appreciate. And he sent me an email the other day and asked if I wanted to come on. And I couldn't say no to the opportunity because when we did that stream last year about Kazakhstan, I did cite one of his videos to talk about it. So it's always kind of cool that the people you watch and listen to, want to have a conversation with you. That's kind of, I kind of get sort of that nerdy giddy bit. It was like, oh cool, all these people that I listen to want to have a conversation with me. I guess I've made it in some form or fashion. So that'll be this Thursday at 9:20. I'm pretty sure. I'll post dates when I know for sure. I'll have to look back at my calendar. Actually, I can do that right now. It is set for 9:20 Eastern to 10 o'clock Eastern on this Thursday, November 10th, which is super exciting. So as for the appearance with Semiagog, he will be on the channel on Saturday, the 26th. So I moved the deglobalization talk to a few weeks out, so Semiagog and I can have more time to research and have a much more in-depth discussion, because Semiagog is a well-read and a well-versed gentleman and one of my favorite recurring guests to come on this show. This Sunday, I will be on recording with Astral of the Astral Flight Simulation podcast Sunday evening. I don't know when that will come out, but I will share it in the community tab as well. And as someone had pointed out in the chat at the beginning, this is my second live stream of the day, but this is the third thing that I've been recording or doing with other people. And we were just talking about a really fun, special topic of American history. No, don't be starting any in towers or anything like that. Just the internet went out real quick. We're back. Hello. Hold on. Let me go put up my slideshow again. We will finish off with Frog of the Week, and I will leave it like that before my internet gets any more wonky. My sincere apologies. with that. I'm so sorry. Typically does not happen, and no in towers for you. I know this. But anyways, so that's going to be happening on Sunday. Monday, of course, is the Old Glory Club debut. This week's Digital Archipelago episode will be on my channel. The topic to be determined, and then all of Patron Book Club will be starting up again. So if you are interested in dealing with reading about the works of Robert Filmer and Patriarcha. We just covered Patriarcha, but he's got several other essays and political works. We'll be covering those very soon on the Patreon Discord, and we'll set up a meeting for that. So if you want to join us, by all means, just as little as $2 a month on subscribestar.com/the Prudentialist. The link's down below in the description. And lo and behold, let's get started then with Frog of the Week, shall we? I'll let the music will play. It'll work with me here. I may not have shared the tab, but anyways, we'll go through it. This week's Frog of the Week is Ankaita's ridged frog, just also known as the river basin frog in Africa. You can find these throughout Central Africa, throughout the equatorial line, around the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Central African Republic, Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, Ethiopia, mainly throughout Central and Sub-Saharan Africa. Oh, there was music. Well, I'll play it when we get back to it. Don't worry. You can mainly find them, however, in diverse biomes, primarily throughout, the savanna to lowland rainforests. So they can be found usually all over the place in these regions, allowing them to survive. As you can tell from over on the right, they've got quite a large vocal sac around the body, which makes them very toad-like in their structure sometimes. But they are very much well known for being aquatic swimmers by their back legs. And they're like most frogs. He's got a very narrow snout. That's how you can usually tell that these guys are aquatic. And they will usually stay close to very large bodies of water, streams, rivers, lakes, as well as rushing streams from flooding. And that's typically during the springtime when they will do their reproduction and making sure that they've got it going from there. So that's what they do. Thankfully, they are on the least concerned list under ICOON for regarding the issue of whether or not they are endangered. But let me go back and see if the music will play since people are asking. So I hope that you all are happy with that. Anyways, I want to thank our top tier patrons that donate $20 or more a month on subscribestar.com, including Fearless Leader, Raging Mandrill, User 4A, 5B, 5DB5, Cowering Bugman, Winston Fujimori, Preservatism, Focron, Consumer, Hunger, and newly amazing Rainfrog tier patron, Voluble Ox. You guys are fantastic people that keep this channel going in every way, shape, or form, and I can't be more grateful for it. And so we will get to the super chats and shilling, but we've done that because it's an AMA stream. So what I'm going to do instead is, let me see here, we'll just have this up there so I can have these people on screen being thanked. I'm going to continue our tradition of reading a little bit from scripture as things come to a close. I'm going to double check if anyone sent a last minute super chat while that weird slight internet outage stopped. Oh, you guys got very close to getting that tower completed. Very bad. Bad. All of you. But yeah, anyways, so no more super chat. Only shilling. Well, you guys have already heard what I've got to shill for you all, primarily based upon the issues of today, and your questions were fantastic. I'm very thankful for that. So with that regard, let's see if I can find what I was reading, or what I've been reading. So here we go. I know, Tower of Babel. But no, this is what we're going to do. We're going to read again from the Wisdom of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiastes in the West. So here we go. This is from chapter 9 of the Wisdom of Sirach. This is from the Septuagint translation. And here we go. Do not be jealous of your wife or your bosom, and so teach her an evil lesson about yourself. Do not give your soul to a woman to let her trample on your strength. Do not meet with a woman who is a courtesan, lest you fall into her snares. Do not associate with the dancing girl, lest you be caught in her schemes. Do not gaze at a virgin, lest you stumble and pay damages for her. Do not give your soul to prostitutes, lest you destroy your inheritance. Do not look around in the streets of a city, and do not wander about it in its deserted sections. Turn your eye away from the woman with a shapely figure, and do not gaze at beauty belonging to another. Many have been led astray by the beauty of a woman, and erotic love is like a burning fire. Never dine in another man's fire, and do not share in parties with her over wine, lest your soul turn aside to her, and you slip with your spirit and fall into destruction. So, when you want to talk about bangers, I know this isn't in many Old Testaments and other places in the West, but if you get a chance to read through Ecclesiastes and the Wisdom of Sirach, it is Proverbs on steroids, and this wisdom is very, very good in lifestyle and enjoying things. So there's your anti-simping passage today. It's in the good book, so by all means, take it to heart. If someone's already going to say that the words of Jesus are a banger, then I think we can take a little bit with regards to that. With all that being said, I hope that you all have a fantastic rest of your weekend. I hope that your life goes well in all facets in your endeavors in which you do. We will be live this Thursday on the Digital Archipelago on my channel. But the last thing that I will stress to all of you is if you could please, very much, I will ask in this one humble request, do share the Shieldings event video. I would like that one to be the one that gets shared around. I thought that was probably some of my best work out there. So take care, everybody. God bless, and we'll see you all next week. See you guys.